Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. So, we are going to be diving into a moment in history that, well, you probably think you already know all about, December 7th, 1941. But our goal for today isn't to just throw standard dates and fleet statistics at you, or give you a textbook summary. Instead, we're going to bypass all of that and uncover the raw, human realities of the attack on Pearl Harbor. We're going to explore how ordinary people survived, how the entire social fabric of Hawaii changed literally overnight, and, fascinatingly, how modern technology is working right now to preserve these memories before they fade away entirely.
Okay, let's dive into this. Just imagine, for a second, hearing these words coming through your radio on what was supposed to be a peaceful Sunday morning. This is not a maneuver, this is the real McCoy. That is the famous and frankly chilling broadcast from Webley Edwards at KGMB Radio in Honolulu. Up until that exact moment, civilians on Oahu were completely accustomed to military exercises. They honestly thought the early detonations were just another drill. But that single sentence instantly shattered the peacetime illusion, signaling to everyone listening that the global cataclysm of World War II had officially arrived on American shores.
And that brings us to this incredibly powerful number 6. For the 82nd anniversary of the attack back in 2023, it was estimated that just 6 living survivors were expected to physically attend the memorial in Hawaii. Out of the thousands and thousands of people who lived through it, only these few centenarians, many of them over 100 years old, were making the journey from states like Nevada and Massachusetts. I think this perfectly frames the pressing urgency of our explainer today. We are at a critical, absolutely vital transition point where lived memory is passing into recorded history.
Section 1. The tactical surprise.
To really understand the human response, we first have to understand how a decade of geopolitical friction culminated in a morning of sheer shock. You see, complete tactical surprise wasn't actually inevitable. It was a result of some incredibly rigid assumptions. Let's look at the timeline. At 3:24 a.m., the USS Condor spotted an unauthorized submarine periscope, which actually led to the very first American shots fired by the USS Ward. Then, at 7:02 a.m., 2 Army privates at an isolated Gahuku radar station detected a massive incoming formation on their screens. But, due to human error, an officer just assumed it was a scheduled flight of American B-17 bombers coming in from the mainland. Because these crucial warnings were dismissed, at 7:48 a.m., Lieutenant Commander Mitsuo Fuchida led the first wave of 183 Japanese aircraft into the harbor, catching the Pacific Fleet completely off guard.
The resulting physical and psychological devastation was just vast. Look at this number, 2,403. Within merely 2 hours, 2,403 Americans were killed. It's a staggering toll to wrap your head around. And what's even more heartbreaking is that nearly half of those lives were lost on a single ship, tragically entombed within the USS Arizona when a fatal detonation ripped right through its forward magazine.
Section 2. Chaos and Disciplined Deviance.
So, the crucial point here is that this incredible scale of macro-level destruction forced an immediate micro-level response. We need to talk about this fascinating concept called disciplined deviance. Essentially, it is the capacity to evaluate a complete tactical breakdown and intentionally bypass military bureaucracy to save lives. Think about it. Standard military training demands strict, unquestioning adherence to orders. But when the centralized command system completely collapses around you, collective defense often relies on ordinary individuals consciously choosing to break the rules. We can vividly see this raw instinct to survive and help others in the sensory details from the eyewitnesses themselves. Take Glenn Lane, for example, a radioman. As the attack began, he was forced to aggressively brush past a Marine lieutenant on a staircase just to escape topside, right before the USS Arizona's lower compartments were sealed off. Or consider Jim Carter. He was just doing mess cooking duty on Ford Island, and he instantly transitioned into triage mode, carrying severely burned sailors that had been pulled from the fiery waters. The sheer humility of these men is captured so beautifully in the words of Lane's daughter, who said he never called himself a hero. He said, "No, the heroes are still down in the ship."
And this right here brilliantly illustrates disciplined deviance in action. Guys like Earl J. Kohler and Joe George. Kohler was actually struck by shrapnel, but he flat out defied orders to stand down so he could run to an ammo shack and fire back at the second wave. And Joe George? He had to disobey a direct command to cut his ship loose, specifically so he could throw a lifeline to trapped sailors on the burning Arizona. They avoided court-martials only because their intentional insubordination was absolutely critical to saving American lives that morning.
Section 3. Civilians and social fallout. Zooming out from the military experience, the geopolitical fallout immediately altered domestic life in Hawaii, bringing martial law and systemic suspicion right to people's front doors. The contrast here is incredibly jarring. The night before, a 10-year-old civilian named Pat Campbell was dancing the jitterbug at a battle of the bands near the Pearl Harbor Gate. The very next day, martial law is declared. Children like 11-year-old Jimmy Lee suddenly found themselves carrying military gas masks everywhere, navigating strict evening curfews, and dealing with total night blackouts. Even more shockingly, Jimmy had to watch as the family of his best friend Toshi Yamamoto was abruptly arrested and taken away by military authorities, their home completely emptied out.
This attack triggered deep, complex ethnic divisions across the islands. On one hand, we see the incredible dedication of the Varsity Victory Volunteers. These were American University of Hawaii ROTC cadets of Japanese descent known as Nisei. When they were dismissed from the Territorial Guard due to sheer public panic, they responded by forming a group to perform hard, manual construction labor for the Army, purely to prove their loyalty to the United States. In stark contrast to that heroism, we see the reality of the Honolulu internment camp. This was a space managed under military law that held local Japanese Americans accused of subversion right alongside thousands of Korean prisoners of war. It created an incredibly tense and complex transnational environment overnight.
Let's move to and see how this builds into Section 4, the technology of remembrance. As the survivor generation sadly passes away, how do we make sure these highly localized, complex stories aren't lost? Well, it's fascinating to see how different documentarians tackle this preservation. National Geographic, for instance, uses cutting-edge underwater archaeology, deploying deep-sea remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, to navigate the silt-laden corridors of the sunken battleships. They basically treat the wreckage like an active scientific laboratory. By contrast, the Smithsonian's The Lost Tapes takes a totally different structural framework. They completely eliminate modern narration. Instead, they scoured global databases for raw, unedited 1941 wire recordings and live radio feeds. It brilliantly forces you, the viewer, to experience the unfolding disaster with the exact same confusion and panic as those who lived it, entirely bypassing any retrospective bias.
But it's not just filmmakers doing this work. Specialized institutional archives employ some incredibly strict methodological guidelines to curate these massive databases of memory. The Library of Congress Veterans History Project specifically trains their interviewers to use open-ended, non-leading questions so that the veterans can define their own emotional experience of the events. Meanwhile, the Rutgers Oral History Archives uses this really cool life course methodology. They conduct exhaustive pre-interview surveys that track a person's entire life, from the Great Depression, through the attack, and all the way into their post-war civilian careers.
Which brings us to Section 5, a living legacy.
All of this meticulous archival work we just talked about ultimately connects right back to the human descendants who are actively taking up the torch today. As we noted at the very beginning of this explainer, with so few survivors left, organizations like the Sons and Daughters of Pearl Harbor Survivors have really stepped in to fill that void. Kathleen Farley, a chapter president whose own father had to dive into the fiery waters off the USS California to survive, sums it up perfectly. She notes that the few survivors who do return, and the children who go in their place, are there for those who were killed in 1941. They serve as the active voices for those who can no longer speak. And that leaves us with a truly powerful, provocative thought to end on today. When the final eyewitness is gone, how will you choose to remember? Will it just be dates and statistics in a textbook for you? Or will you remember the disciplined deviants, the jitterbug dancers, the deep-sea ROVs, and the raw human courage that truly defined that morning? History isn't just something that happened in the past. It's a legacy we actively choose to preserve. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep learning, keep asking great questions, and I will see you next time.